Very warm greetings to you as you join us on today's episode of Tax Matters. My name is Olumiwa Matuloko. We have a guest in the house and a person of a coordinating director in charge of standards and compliance at the Federal Revenue Service Headquarters in Abuja, Mr. Andy Ejemeyovwi. Mr. Ejemeyovwi will be talking about value-added tax, that tax that we say concerns everyone. But do not let us take the cat out of the bag yet. Let the expert speak for us. Mr. Ejemeyovwi, you're welcome to Tax Matters.
Good day.
We want to talk about value-added tax.
Thank you.
And we know that we're in the right place. Sir, let's start from the very beginning, like they say. What is value-added tax?
Value-added tax is a consumption tax. It means when you consume, you pay the tax. And if you don't consume, it means you don't pay anything as far as the tax is concerned. So that is what value-added tax is generally.
When was it introduced in Nigeria?
Value-added tax was introduced in 1994. It has been with us for quite some time, and it is a tax many countries wish to establish, if they are not done so, or impose on the citizenry, because it is an indirect tax which yields a lot of revenue to government.
Okay. What is the rate of value-added tax in Nigeria?
The rate of value-added tax in Nigeria is 5%.
Is that a competitive rate when you look at our neighbors in the West African sub-region?
Thank you for that question. The value-added tax rate of 5% in Nigeria is not comparable to the tax in many jurisdictions because it is very, very low. It started with 5% and today is 5%. You see so many countries operating rates of 18%, 15%. The average in the western sub-region, you can put it about 15%.
Wow.
But in Nigeria, we are still operating that rate of 5% on the cost of the VAT-able goods. Okay. It has not changed.
Which arm of government collects value-added tax?
Value-added tax is collected by the Federal Inland Revenue Service on behalf of the federal government.
Okay.
Note that the states used to have what they call sales tax, and it was legislated into value-added tax, and the federal government allowed the Federal Inland Revenue Service to collect this tax.
Okay. Okay.
So, although FRS is collecting a tax, the sharing of the proceeds is for all the states, okay, federal government, and the local governments in Nigeria.
So the federal government does not collect and keep?
No, it does not collect and keep. In fact, it's actually the little cost of collection that is collecting, and the main chunk goes to the states and the local government.
Okay. You have told us which arm of government collects. Who pays? Who pays VAT?
When you consume what they call a VAT-able product, you pay for it. So it means both old and young, as long as they consume a valuable product, they have to pay. But let me quickly add that it is not all payments. We have exemptions, by which if a good is exempted, service is exempted, like basic food items, like baby products, and you discover that you are exempted from the payment of VAT. We also have what we call zero-rated goods,
okay,
which are inside the VAT system, but the rate of tax is 0%.
What do you mean by that?
Now, what we mean by that is that such products, you have, for example, you have of these people who come in from other countries, as what do you call them, representing their countries in the within Nigeria.
Okay, diplomats.
Thank you. Diplomats, for example, their consumption is not vatable at the normal rate. It's at 0%, and it's called 0%.
Okay.
So whatever is paid is refunded back to them.
Okay.
Unlike the case of exemptions that are not in the system. So once they consume such products, you discover that there's nothing like refund because they are not within the system. But however, since they are exempted, they are not expected to pay anything on the service or the good that is exempted.
Okay. Let's go a bit practical. You said that value-added tax is a tax on consumption.
Yes.
Now, if I go into a shopping mall or a supermarket or an eatery, how does it work out? How does it play out? How do I pay VAT?
We are expected to have a tax invoice, restaurants, barber shop, in which the amount is incorporated in the invoice. We call it tax invoice. So after you have consumed your food, after the amount is stated, it's expected to be what we call, the VAT as an addition, which is 5% of the consumption. And by so doing, the payment you are making includes the value-added tax.
Okay.
So it is expected that restaurant, barber shop, or whatever name you call it, they will now make remittance or whatever is collected from you as a taxpayer and remit it to the Federal Inland Revenue Service.
Okay.
So the remittance to FRS means that there's an agent who is doing that on behalf of the Federal Inland Revenue Service. Okay. Ministry, departments, agencies, and companies,
so
individuals.
Okay.
So as long as they are registered to collect this tax, it is expected that they would total them at the end of the month and make the payment not later than the 21st or the month following the month of consumption.
Okay. Okay.
Or that vertical goods.
Okay. But when you talk about deductions, something came to my mind. For those who do business with government agencies, ministries, departments and agencies, they deduct value-added tax. They also deduct withholding tax at source. What is the relationship between value-added tax and withholding tax?
Okay, so before I answer that, I will also make a little bit of clarification with regard to the input VAT and the output VAT.
Okay, so we're coming to that, but go ahead.
Okay, when you're talking about input VAT, it has to do with the VAT paid when you are paid for the supply. Wherever now you are now receiving, you are collecting on behalf, then you are talking of output VAT. It is the difference that is actually payable. The difference between the output and input is payable to the Federal Revenue Service, and returns are made on a monthly basis for this purpose. Now, the VAT, value-added tax, is a consumption tax. Once you you consume the product, then you make payment for it. This is different from what we call withholding tax, as you have asked. Withholding tax is amount withheld at source, from the tax payable by that individual or company. So you are expected to file a return at the end of the year, and you're expected that everything should be brought in. But when you're making a transaction, there's a transaction, it means that you will now have to make a deduction. Somebody has a small contract worth 100,000 naira. And in this contract, it's okay, there's supposed to be an inbuilt profit made from that transaction. So it is expected that depending on the rates applicable according to law, it is applied, and that amount is paid over by that authority to the Federal Inland Revenue Service. So that amount is what we call advance payment of tax, withholding tax. It is withheld from the profit of that organization, individual, until the final tax is computed. And that amount is now deducted from the tax payable by the individual, if it's personal income tax, or from the company, in the case of company's income tax. You know, and it is a balance that is paid. So you see that they are different things. One is a consumption tax, it's a final tax. Once you consume, you make the payment. And such payment becomes final to the individual that the incidence of that tax is falling off. If the consumption is by the ministry or agency, they have to make that payment at the final tax. But it may be a company, and if it's a company, it's also a final tax to the company. But remember that the taxable agents may not necessarily be the person that's consuming the product. So you should know the differences.
Okay.
And you also know that the company's income tax and personal income tax, they have to administer the withholding tax. The same thing with petroleum profit tax. It is different from that of value-added tax, which is under the Value-Added Tax Act. So there are different taxes with different bases that are prescribed by law. You can't move further, you can't diminish from it.
We'll go for a short commercial break. When we come back, we'll look at some terms that we had this morning at the workshop, the sensitization workshop that you held in Abuja. Vatable goods, vatable services, exempted items. Don't go away.
Madam, thank you very much.
Now what do be this? Make it sorry I will you. The thing where you send me too much, calculation is where okay.
Madam, me correct now. Now the price be that.
You are playing with fire, so me I know say they never start fast for picking things. Oh, you want to play me while you? You want to teach me a bit?
Madam, now everything with the advert on top. Now so with the seller.
Madam, you dey correct o.
Good day, madam. Any problem? Problem there.
The thing be say una not supposed to charge VAT for baby items and other things wey dey for VAT exemption list.
Sam.
Chai! This one na wayo receipt o. Correct receipt suppose contain the things wey you buy and the VAT wey dey on top. Then other items wey not get VAT, you go put them separately.
Madam, I apologize, You go change that.
Change that. You see say we don't know what the government.
To pay VAT dey compulsory. Now government they use to make our life jolly, to collect and pay sharply to government. It is correct.
FIRS, it pays to pay your tax.
Welcome back. The program is still Tax Matters, and we're looking at value-added tax in all its ramifications. Our guest is a coordinating director at the Federal Revenue Service, Mr. Ejemeyovwi. Mr. Ejemeyovwi, you're welcome once again.
Thank you.
Some terms came up this morning at the workshop that was held in Abuja. Vatable goods, vatable services, exempted items. Which are vatable goods?
All items within the supplies of goods and services are vatable unless they're exempted or they come under the zero rated aspect of it.
Okay.
So when we talked about supplies, it could be a trading good, it could be a house, delivered. There are so many items which I cannot actually prescribe.
What are the exempted goods and services under the VAT law?
As I said before, all goods and services are vatable unless they're exempt or they're zero rated. The exempt items include baby products, basic food items, agricultural equipments for the free zone areas. We also have books and educational materials. There are other ones like something like fertilizers, tractors, plows used for agricultural purposes. And services include the following: medical services.
Okay.
We have services rendered by community banks.
Okay.
And plays and performances used in educational institutions and all exported services.
Okay.
Also note that zero-rated items include the following: goods and services purchased by diplomats, all forms of non-oil exports. All these are zero-rated, and goods and services used for donor-funded products. All these are zero-rated items under the law. Yes.
Another one that we picked up was VAT agents. You said earlier that we should note that sometimes the vatable person is not the consumer. You said something like that. Did I get you right? That the
taxable person, the vatable person, will not be the one that will make even the payment to the Federal Land Revenue Service, because there's an agent.
Okay.
Such agents are used for the collection of VAT. So once a company individual is registered, it becomes an agent of collection of that tax. So when there are valuable supplies in a shop, in a store, in a ministry, no matter the situation, it is now expected for that agent to deduct the VAT and make the payment on behalf of FRS. That's why I told you that the person must be registered. Because somebody can open a shop and say, I'm collecting VAT, and it's not registered. You discover that that is a fraud, because that person cannot even remit whatever he has collected. And of course, the motive for such a thing cannot be anything other than fraud. Okay. So there must be registration.
Okay.
After the registration, the person now should be able to keep those books of account that enable you to really know what is supplied, what is paid for, and it becomes easy for you to have what their business is actually doing. You know what they are owing, you know who you are owing, and all that. So you also know you have to carry out your own responsibilities by making the payments of VAT to the Federal Land Revenue Service when the person is registered for the purpose.
Talking about registering for VAT, there used to be a time when the FRS issued certificates of registration for value-added tax, and some of those agents would display those certificates. Do you still have that in place?
Well, the VAT certificates have been issued for quite some time. We have not said that those who are having them on should discard them or tear them away. But there is something, a development, especially concerning the taxpayer identification number, which is not only used for VAT, but it's also used for the company's income tax. So it is not just a display alone or the certificate, but you know that you cannot make any payment to the banks who are holding brief for FRS without a taxpayer identification number.
Okay.
It is very, very critical. It is not the VAT number we are using these times. We are using the
TIN number,
TIN number, taxpayer identification number.
Okay. That suffices.
Which also in the tax invoice, which is issued.
Okay.
So with that, we are not glorifying the issue of getting a VAT certificate and putting it somewhere. Okay. But rather, we emphasize that a taxpayer identification number, which we expect our taxpayers to be able to get, which is free of charge from any of our offices. Okay. Even at the headquarters level, if you're having problem at all, you can even come in and we'll give you the taxpayer identification number.
Still talking about agents,
yeah.
There was a time that you also had another workshop for ministries, departments and agencies in the Federal Capital Territory to sensitize them as to their roles and responsibilities as tax collecting agents. In the area of VAT, what is the role of ministries, departments and agencies and oil companies? Because we understand that some time ago you asked oil companies to deduct VAT from their contractors at source and remit to you. How did you play that role?
Thank you very much. We have what we call deduction of VAT, at source. to enable us actually have our collections in good time and to expect the system to flow even better. It is recently we're joining the oil companies in adopting and making direct payments. It's a system that is working, and you know that if you allow money to stay for a very long time with somebody, something may happen. So it is expected that this amount is paid in good time and remitted, on behalf of whichever person is consuming the product. So it is a system that is still working. It is a payment which you make at the end of the day, which comes to the credit, of the taxable person.
Still talking about VAT agents. You have told us in the course of this interview that a ministry or department or agency of government is the consumer of the goods or services being supplied by the contractor, which means that the incidence of value-added tax is supposed to be borne by the ministry. Now, when payment is being made to the contractor, why don't you simply allow him to get his full check, that is to say, contract sum plus VAT, and then he will now remit to the FIRS?
Thank you for that question. The system as it is working shows that it is not a payment actually meant for the contractor. The payment is meant for the FIRS, the government agency, and that portion don't actually belong to the contractor at all.
Okay.
So it should not go to the contractor and come back again. So it is a wise step to make the payment directly to the FIRS. And secondly, things can also go wrong. And in many cases, when you make payment directly to contractors, that amount, you may not be able to see that amount back. If you see it, maybe a portion of it may come back.
Okay.
So it is always better to make the payment directly, to the FIRS, and pay it, to the types of government that are sharing.
Okay, so you are playing safe.
You have to play very safe.
Madam, thank you very much.
Now what be this? Make it sound like where you? The thing where you side me too much, calculation is where OJ.
Madam, me correct now. Now the price be that.
You are playing with fire, so go. Me, I know say they never start fat for picking things. Oh, you want to play me, why you? You want to teach me, Abi?
Madam, now everything with the add VAT on top. Now so with the seller.
Madam, you dey correct o.
Good day, madam. Any problem?
Problem there.
The thing be say una not supposed to charge VAT for baby items and other things wey dey for VAT exemption list.
Sam.
Chai! This one na wayo receipt o. Correct receipt suppose contain the things wey you buy and the VAT wey dey on top. Then other items wey not get VAT, you go put them separately.
Madam, I apologize, You go change that.
Change that. You see, say we don't know where the government.
To pay VAT dey compulsory. Na government dey use to make our life jolly, to collect and pay sharply to government. It dey correct.
FIRS, it pays to pay your tax.
Viewers, we are afraid that on this note, we have to call it a day on today's episode of the program. But we are not through yet with this discussion on value-added tax. So next week, we will have the second part of this interesting expose on value-added tax. And Mr. Andy Ejemeyovwi will still be our guest. We want to thank you most sincerely for watching, and we want you to have a blessed week ahead.